Hello and welcome. It is time to let the day and all of its concerns simply fade away. Find your most comfortable position and gently close your eyes. Let's begin with a single, slow, deep breath. Breathe in deeply. As you breathe out, feel the tension begin to leave your body. There's nothing else you need to do tonight. There's nothing to focus on and nothing to remember. The story I am about to tell is just a quiet murmur in the background, a calm and steady presence. Tonight we will travel back to the 10th century, to a longhouse in the misty fjords of Norway, to hear the story of what a feast was like in a Viking great hall. So just relax and allow the sound of my voice to accompany you. As you drift towards a deep and peaceful sleep, our story begins in the year 985, in the late autumn. The long, bright days of summer are a distant memory, and the raiding season is over. The ships have been pulled ashore, their dragon-headed prows now resting, waiting for the spring. The harvest is in, the grain stored, the cattle brought down from the high pastures. A cold, damp chill hangs in the air, a promise of the long, dark winter that is to come. But before that darkness settles, it is a time for celebration, for the reaffirmation of bonds, a time for a great feast. You are a warrior, a landowner of some standing, and you have been summoned to the hall of your Jarl, Olaf the Steadfast. You have spent the better part of the day traveling, first by long ship along the cold, gray waters of the fjord, its sheer rock walls rising like giants on either side, and then on horseback, following a muddy, winding track inland. The journey is a familiar one, a pilgrimage made by all those who owe allegiance to the Jarl. As you break through the tree line, you see his steadying, and as always, the sight fills you with a sense of awe and security. It is not a single building, but a small, bustling village in itself, a great farmstead surrounded by a tall timber palisade. You see the low turf-roofed longhouses of the farmhands and the craftsmen, the smoky haze of the blacksmith's forge, the animal pens, and the great timber-framed barns. But dominating it all, sitting on the highest point of land, is the Jarl's own residence, the Great Hall. It is a magnificent and intimidating structure, a testament to Olaf's power and wealth. It is over 200 feet long, its walls made of immense, dark, vertical timbers, the wood coated in black tar to protect it from the relentless damp of the Norwegian air. The roof is steep, covered in wooden shingles, and from each gable end, a carved and painted beast head glares out over the landscape. Its intricate dragon-like forms designed to ward off evil spirits and impress any visitor. As you ride closer, you are enveloped by the sounds and smells of the gathering. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, not just from the hall itself, but from dozens of cooking fires and torches set up around the grounds. You hear the shouts of stable hands as they take the horses of the arriving guests, the lowing of cattle, and the murmur of 100 conversations as warriors, chieftains, and farmers from all across the Jarl's lands greet one another after a long season apart. You dismount, handing the reins of your horse to a young boy, and make your way towards the great carved wooden doors of the hall. This is a moment of social transition. Here at the threshold, you must leave the wild, outside world behind and enter the ordered social world of the Jarl. Before entering, a servant directs you to a row of pegs where you must hang your heavy, fur-lined cloak, and more importantly, your weapons. Your sword, your shield, and your axe are all left at the door. To enter the hall armed is a grave insult to the Jarl's authority, a suggestion that his peace cannot be trusted. When you are ready, you push open one of the heavy doors and step inside. The change is immediate and overwhelming to the senses. You move from the cold, damp air of the evening into a vast, warm, and hazy space. The sheer size of the hall is the first thing that strikes you. The ceiling is high above, the great roof beams lost in the thick, swirling smoke that fills the upper third of the room. The only light comes from two sources: the long central fire pit that runs down the middle of the hall, and a series of simple iron lamps, filled with fish oil or tallow, that are hung from the walls and pillars, their flickering flames casting deep, dancing shadows. The air itself is thick, a rich and complex mixture of smells. The dominant scent is of the fire, the clean, sharp aroma of burning pine and oak. Woven into this is the heavy, savory smell of roasting meat. You can see it now, turning slowly on a massive iron spit over the largest part of the fire, a whole ox, its skin crackling and glistening in the firelight. Beneath this is the yeasty, sweet smell of brewing ale, the faint, waxy scent of beeswax from the more expensive candles on the Jarl's table, and the earthy human smell of damp wool, leather, and the press of 100 bodies. Your ears, too, must adjust. The hall is not yet full, but it is alive with sound. The roar and crackle of the great long fire is the constant bass note. Over this, you hear the low murmur of dozens of conversations, the sound echoing in the vast, high-ceilinged space. You hear the occasional burst of loud, booming laughter, and the clatter of wooden cups and trenchers as servants begin to lay out the tables. Before you can move further, a servant approaches with a wooden bowl of water and a piece of linen. It is the custom to wash your hands and face after a long journey, a ritual of purification before you take your seat. Once you have done so, you are guided to your place. The layout of the hall is a map of the society it contains. Running along both of the long walls are two raised earthen platforms upon which are set long, heavy wooden tables and benches. The closer your seat is to the center of the hall, the greater your status. In the very middle of the northern bench is the high seat, a great carved chair where the Jarl himself will sit. The most honored guests and his most trusted warriors will sit on either side of him. Your own seat, a testament to your standing, is a respectable distance down from the center, but still far from the doors, where the lowest-ranking farmhands and servants will sit. You take your place on the hard wooden bench, which is covered with a rough woolen cloth. From here you watch as the hall continues to fill. Warriors greet each other with loud clasps of the forearm, their faces ruddy in the firelight, their beards thick and braided, their wives and daughters dressed in fine, colorful linen and adorned with jewelry of amber, silver, and glass, find their own places. Their conversations a quieter counterpoint to the men's booming voices. The Jarl has not yet made his appearance. The high seat remains empty. For now, this is a time of greeting, of anticipation, of a slow rising tide of energy as the great hall prepares for the feast to truly begin. You settle into your place on the long bench, the rough spun wool of the covering scratching slightly through your tunic. Now that your eyes have adjusted to the dim, smoky light, the true artistry and grandeur of the hall begin to reveal themselves. This is more than just a large building. It is a statement of power, a story told in wood and shadow. The massive timber pillars that support the high arching roof are not simple, unfinished logs. Each one is a work of art, its surface covered in a complex and dizzying web of intricate carvings. You trace the lines with your eyes, following the patterns of interlacing knots that coil and uncoil like great serpents. Within these patterns, you can make out the forms of beasts from myth and legend. The gaping jaws of the wolf Fenrir, the coiling body of Jarmangander, the world serpent, and the sharp talons of a great eagle. The figures seem to writhe and move in the flickering firelight, the pillars transformed into living columns of story. Between the pillars, the long walls are hung with tapestries. There are immense pieces of woven wool, their once bright colors now muted and deepened by years of exposure to the wood smoke. One large panel near you depicts a famous scene from the life of the Jarl's grandfather, a great sea battle, long ships clashing, axes rising and falling, and the waves depicted as a series of stylized, angry coils. It is both a piece of art and a piece of propaganda, a constant reminder to all present of the Jarl's heroic lineage and the martial prowess upon which his power is built. The great long fire in the center of the hall is the heart of this world. It is a beast of its own, constantly roaring, consuming the massive logs that the servants feed it. The smoke, thick with the scent of pine resin, rises in a great gray pillar towards the smoke hole in the roof, a simple, dark square cut into the shingles, but much of the smoke does not escape. It eddies and swirls in the high rafters, and over the years it has blackened the wood to the color of soot. You can see whole sides of bacon and strings of fish hanging high in the rafters, being slowly cured and preserved in the perpetual smoke. The fire is not just for light and warmth, it is a tool, a vital part of the household's economy. The floor of the hall is simple packed earth, but it is covered with a thick, fresh layer of rushes. As people walk, the rushes crush underfoot, releasing a faint, sweet, and clean scent that does little to mask the more powerful odors of the hall, but adds its own pleasant note to the air. You know that by the end of the night, these rushes will be stained with spilled ale and littered with discarded bones from the feast. But for now, they lend an air of rustic freshness to the room. The hall is now nearly full, and the low murmur of conversation has grown into a steady, rumbling hum. Men who have spent the summer trading in the east or raiding in the west are now greeting each other, their voices booming as they recount their travels. They compare the weight of the new silver arm rings they have acquired, and argue good-naturedly over the quality of a new sword. It is a time for renewing friendships, for gauging the fortunes of others, and for the subtle, constant negotiation of status and alliance. You also see the Jarl's wife, the Lady Sigrid, moving through the hall. She is a tall, imposing woman, her blonde hair elaborately braided and coiled. She does not shout or give loud commands, but she moves with an air of quiet, undisputed authority. At her belt, a ring of iron keys jingles softly, a symbol of her power as the mistress of the household. She has control over the food stores, the chests of treasure, the linens, and the very functioning of this great and complex enterprise. She gives a quiet word to a serving girl, a sharp nod to the man overseeing the spit, ensuring that every detail of the coming feast is in order. Her presence is a calming and ordering force in the rising tide of masculine energy. Then a sudden hush falls over the hall. The conversations do not stop at once, but they taper off, one by one. As a shared sense of anticipation spreads through the room, all eyes turn towards a large carved door near the center of the northern wall, a private entrance from the Jarl's own living quarters. The door opens, and Jarl Loloth the Steadfast steps into the hall. He is a man in his prime, broad-shouldered and powerful, his presence filling the space around him. His beard, the color of reddish gold, is long and thick, neatly braided and bound with silver rings. He is not dressed for war. He wears a long tunic of deep blue wool, a color so rich it speaks of expensive foreign dyes. The collar and cuffs are embroidered with intricate patterns in gold thread. Over this he wears a simple leather belt with a large silver buckle, from which hangs only a small knife, a tool for eating, not for fighting. He carries no axe, no sword, needs no weapon here. His authority is absolute. He walks not to the fire, not to greet his guests, but directly to the high seat, his carved throne-like chair in the center of the long bench. He moves with a slow, deliberate confidence, and the crowd parts before him. He stands before the seat for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the entire hall, taking in every face, acknowledging his assembled followers with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. His wife Sigrid takes her place in the chair beside him. Then, with a slow, regal grace, Jarl Olaf sits. The act is simple, but its meaning is immense. The center of power is now established. The social world of the hall now has its anchor. The Jarl is in his rightful place, and the feast can now truly begin. He says nothing, but he lifts his own great drinking horn from the table. A magnificent thing made from the horn of an auroch and tipped with silver, and holds it up for a moment in a silent toast to the hall. A low, respectful cheer rumbles through the assembled crowd. The time for waiting is over. With Jarl Olaf now seated upon his high seat, a palpable shift occurs in the hall. The informal, boisterous mood of arrival settles into one of respectful, formal anticipation. The hum of conversation continues, but it is more subdued now. The attention of the entire assembly focused on the elevated platform where their leader sits, silent, powerful anchor in the sea of his followers. To the Jarl's right sits a figure who is as important to the spirit of the hall as the Jarl is to its power. He is an old man, his hair and long beard the color of snow. His face is a roadmap of wrinkles, and his eyes, though clouded with age, hold a sharp, intelligent light. In his lap he cradles a small, triangular harp or lyre, its wooden frame worn smooth by decades of use. This is Bjorn, the Jarl Skald. He is more than a mere entertainer. He is the memory of the clan, the keeper of the great stories, the genealogies, and the epic poems that define who these people are. His presence signifies that this feast is not simply a meal, it is a cultural ceremony. For a long moment, the only sounds are the crackling of the fire and the low murmur of the crowd. Then Jarl Olaf rises slowly to his feet. A deep, expectant silence falls over the hall. He holds his great drinking horn in one hand, but does not yet raise it. His voice, when he speaks, is a deep and powerful rumble that fills the vast space without any need for shouting. The kinsmen and warriors, he begins, his gaze sweeping across the faces turned towards him. You are welcome in my hall. The raiding season is done. The harvest is gathered. The gods have been kind to us this year. We have filled our storehouses with grain and our chests with silver. Tonight we feast to honor them and to honor the bonds that make us strong. He pauses, letting his words settle. Tonight we thank Thor for the strength of our arms, and Freya for the bounty of our lands. But first, he says, his voice taking on a graver tone, we honor the All-Father, Odin, the giver of wisdom and victory, the chooser of the slain as he speaks, the Lady Sigrid and other high-status women of the household begin to move through the hall. They carry large, brimming drinking horns and ornate wooden buckets filled with ale. They move with a practiced ceremonial grace, ensuring that every guest, from the most honored warrior at the high table to the lowest farmhand by the door, has a full horn.
Oh.
You are handed yours, a polished cow's horn, cool and smooth to the touch, its contents a dark, fragrant, and foaming ale. When all are served, Jarl Olaf raises his own horn high. "Toast!" he roars, his voice now a clap of thunder. "To Odin, for victory in the last season, and for victory in the next." Scowl. A single unified roar erupts from the hall. Skull. 100 voices shout in unison, a deep primal sound that seems to shake the very timbers of the roof. You raise your own horn to your lips and drink deeply. The ale is strong, dark, and smoky, brewed with barley that has been dried over an open fire. It is unfiltered, thick with sediment, and flavored not with hops, but with bitter, aromatic herbs like bog myrtle. It is the taste of the land itself, strong and uncompromising. This is the beginning of the sumbel, the sacred and formal ritual of toasting that forms the very heart of the feast. It is a ritual of 3 rounds. The first toast is always to the gods. The next will be to the great heroes of the past, and the third will be for personal boasts and the swearing of oaths. As the echoes of the first toast fade and the guests lower their horns, a new sound rises in the hall. It is the gentle, resonant plucking of strings. The skald Bjorn has begun to play his lyre. It's simple, melodic notes cut through the smoky air, a stark and beautiful contrast to the raw power of the warrior's shout. He does not begin with a great long epic that will come later in the evening. He begins, as is custom, with a praise poem for his Jarl. His voice is old and reedy, but it carries a surprising strength, a rhythmic, chanting quality that holds the attention of the entire hall. He sings of Olaf's generosity, calling him a breaker of rings, a lord who freely gives the silver from his arm to his loyal followers. He sings of Olaf's skill in battle, calling him a feeder of ravens, a warrior whose prowess provides a feast for the carrion birds on the battlefield. The words are formulaic, part of a long and ancient tradition of oral poetry, but they are no less powerful for it. Every line reinforces the Jarl's authority, his right to rule, and the virtues that his followers expect of him: generosity, courage, and wisdom. As the skald sings, Jarl Olaf sits impassively on his high seat, listening without expression, but you can see the pride in his eyes. The poem is a public affirmation of his bond with his people. When the short poem is finished, a respectful cheer goes up from the benches. The skald gives a slight, dignified bow of his head and falls silent, though his fingers continue to pluck a soft, quiet melody from the strings of his lyre. The formal opening of the feast is now complete. The hall has been consecrated by the toast to the gods. The Jarl's authority has been celebrated by the skald. The social order is affirmed, and the atmosphere is now perfectly set. A signal is given, and a line of servants begins to move from the great fire pit, their arms laden with heavy, steaming wooden platters. The air, which was already rich with the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat, now takes on the new, delicious aromas of the first course. The long wait is over. The feasting is about to begin. As the last notes of the skald's praise poem fade, the ordered procession of the feast begins. The servants who had been waiting patiently along the walls now move with a swift and practiced efficiency. There are no individual plates. The feast is a communal affair, a shared experience of abundance. Great round flat loaves of dark heavy bread, baked earlier in the day, are placed directly onto the wooden tables. These are the trenchers, a kind of edible plate designed to soak up the juices of the foods that will soon be piled upon them. Following the bread, the first wave of food arrives from the bustling cooking area near the great fire. The dishes are simple, hearty, and overwhelmingly plentiful. Large, steaming wooden platters are set down at intervals along the long tables, each one laden with thick slices of boiled meat. You use the point of your own personal knife, the small seeks that every man carries, to spear a piece and bring it to your trencher. The meat is pork and mutton, simmered for hours in a great iron cauldron with onions and a handful of juniper berries, leaving it incredibly tender and rich with the flavor of its own fat. Another platter arrives bearing fish. There are whole salmon baked slowly on a bed of damp straw, their pink flesh flaking away from the bone. There are bowls of pickled herring, their sharp vinegary taste a welcome contrast to the richness of the boiled meats. And there is salted cod, a staple of the northern diet, which has been soaked for days to remove the brine and then poached in milk until it is soft and white. Bowls of other foods are passed down the long benches, hand to hand. There is a bright yellow, freshly churned butter, salty and rich. There are large, crumbly wheels of a sharp white cheese, similar to a modern farmer's cheese. There is a thick, bubbling porridge of yellow peas, a staple vegetable that can be stored throughout the long winter. And there are roasted root vegetables, turnips, carrots, and onions, all slightly sweetened and blackened from the embers of the fire pit where they were cooked. You eat with your hands and your knife. Forks are an unknown luxury. You tear off a piece of your bread trencher to scoop up the pea porridge, and you use your knife to cut the tender meat into manageable pieces. The etiquette is simple. You eat your fill. You do not hoard the best pieces for yourself, and you pass the platters along when your neighbor needs them. Discarded bones are simply tossed onto the rush-covered floor beneath the table, to be swept up in the morning or gnawed on by the Jarl's hounds that wander freely through the hall. Now, while you eat, the drink continues to flow without pause. Serving girls, their faces flushed from the heat of the fire, move constantly along the benches carrying large two-handled wooden buckets filled with frothing ale. They refill every horn and every wooden cup the moment it is empty. The drink is not an accompaniment to the meal. It is the lifeblood of the feast itself, a social lubricant designed to loosen the tongue, warm the spirit, and fuel the long night of celebration ahead. When the first great wave of hunger has been sated, Jarl Olaf once again rises to his feet. A respectful quiet descends as he prepares to initiate the second round of the sumbul. This round is for the dead, for the great heroes and ancestors whose deeds have shaped the world of the living. I drink now to the memory of my grandfather, Hakon the Dragon Slayer, the Jarl proclaims, his voice resonating with pride. It was he who first built this hall, with timbers he dragged from the forest with his own hands. It was he who sailed west and brought back the silver that made our clan prosperous. His name is remembered and his deeds give us strength. To Hakon, he drinks deeply from his horn, and the hall roars back the toast to Hakon. You and the other guests drink as well, a gesture of respect not just for the Jarl's ancestor, but for the entire concept of lineage and the importance of a legacy that outlives a man's short time on earth. This is the signal for others to do the same. a grizzled, one-eyed warrior, a famed berserker in his youth, rises unsteadily to his feet further down the table. "I drink to the memory of Eric the Red," shouts, who was exiled from this land but did not despair. He sailed into the unknown and found a new land of green, a place for Norsemen to thrive. To Eric. The hall cheers and drinks again. Another man, younger, stands and toasts his own father, who died in the last raiding season, his shield broken and his sword in his hand. He tells a brief, heartfelt story of his father's courage, his voice thick with both grief and pride. This round of toasting continues for some time, a living recitation of the sagas, a weaving together of personal and communal history. It is a way of reminding everyone in the hall of the values they hold sacred: courage, adventure, loyalty, and the pursuit of a name that will be remembered in song and story long after they are gone. As the second round of toasts concludes, the servants begin to clear away the remnants of the first course. The bread trenchers, now heavy and sodden with the juices of the meat and fish, are not thrown away. They are collected and given as a treat to the hounds, or to the poor who might be waiting outside the hall's doors. The tables are wiped down, and a new wave of anticipation builds in the hall. The initial hunger has been blunted, and the formal toasts to the past are complete. The atmosphere is now warmer, louder, the ale and mead having done their work. The stage is perfectly set for the centerpiece of the meal, the great roasted ox, and for the heart of the evening's entertainment. As the last of the ancestral toasts is drunk, a new wave of activity stirs from the great fire pit. The moment everyone has been waiting for has arrived. Two strong servants, their faces beaded with sweat, walk to either end of the massive iron spit that has been turning over the flames for the better part of the day. With a coordinated heave, they lift the entire spit, with its immense burden, from its cradle over the fire. The centerpiece of the feast is now revealed in all its glory. It is the roasted ox, a creature so large that its presentation is a spectacle in itself. Its skin is a dark, crackling tapestry of black and deep brown, glistening with rendered fat and seasoned with a thick crust of salt and herbs. The heat radiating from it is immense, and the rich primal smell of roasted beef now fills the hall, overpowering all other scents. The ox, still on its spit, is carried on the shoulders of 4 men down the central aisle of the hall, a ceremonial procession that allows all the guests to admire the Jarl's magnificent generosity. It is finally placed on a massive trough-like wooden table set up near the high seat. Jarl Olaf rises, a long, sharp carving knife in his hand. He walks to the roasted beast, and in a symbolic gesture of his role as the provider and chieftain, he makes the first cut, slicing off a large, steaming piece of the crispy skin and rich meat beneath. This first choicest piece is presented to the Skald Bjorn, an act of respect for his vital role in the hall. After this ceremony, the Jarl returns to his seat, and a team of skilled carvers takes over, their long knives flashing in the firelight as they expertly dismantle the great carcass. Great platters of the roasted meat are then carried down the long tables. The meat is unlike anything you have ever tasted. The outer layers are charred and salty, a delicious, crispy bark that gives way to an interior that is incredibly tender and juicy, having been slow roasted for more than 10 hours. Is the rich flavor of the beef raised on the green pastures of the Jarl's own lands, is complemented by the smoky taste from the open fire. Alongside the meat, Bowls of a simple, sharp sauce made from wild lingonberries and honey are passed around. Its sweet and tart flavor a perfect counterpoint to the richness of the meat and fat. As this main course is served, the atmosphere in the hall undergoes a profound change. The respectful, somewhat formal mood of the opening rituals dissolves in a wave of boisterous cheer. The volume in the room rises dramatically. The low murmur of conversation has been replaced by a roar of laughter, of loud boasts, and of men banging their empty horns on the wooden tables to call for more ale. The air grows thick and warm, the heat from the fire combining with the heat of so many bodies packed together. The smoke from the fire, the torches, and the oil lamps creates a thick, hazy veil that hangs in the air, through which the figures at the far end of the hall are just dim, shifting shapes. In the midst of this rising tide of cheerful chaos, the skald Bjorn once again finds a moment of focus. The time for short praise poems is over. Now, with bellies full and spirits high, the hall is ready for a great story. He strikes a few loud, resonant chords on his lyre to get the crowd's attention. A relative quiet descends, not a true silence, but a lowering of the conversational roar to a respectful murmur. Bjorn begins his recitation, is chosen a favorite, a well-known and much-loved tale from the mythology. Thor's disastrous and comical journey to the land of the giants, to the castle of Loki. His voice changes, becoming a rhythmic, hypnotic chant that follows the strict, alliterative meter of ancient Norse poetry. He sings of Thor and his companion Loki arriving at the giant's great hall, changes his voice, becoming the booming, boastful Thor, and then the cunning, deceptive giant king. The audience is captivated. They know this story by heart, but they delight in the skald's skillful telling of it. He describes the contests the giants propose to the god of thunder. First, the eating contest, which Loki loses to a giant who is, in fact, wildfire itself. The hall roars with laughter. They are part of the performance, shouting encouragement to the heroes and insults at their tricksters. The skald then tells of Thor's own contests. His attempt to lift a giant cat from the floor, cat which is in reality the Midgard serpent which encircles the entire world. The skald's voice rises with the strain as he describes Thor heaving with all his godly might, managing only to lift one of the great beast's paws from the ground. And finally, the drinking contest. The skald describes the great horn that Thor is challenged to empty in 3 draughts. He mimes the god putting the horn to his lips, his voice a low rumble as he describes the immense swallows of mead. But the level in the horn barely seems to fall. The hall howls with delight at the god's frustration, for they know the secret the skald is about to reveal. That the other end of the horn is connected to the ocean itself, and that Thor, in his attempt to drink, has lowered the level of all the seas in the world. The skald is not just a storyteller. He is a conductor of the hall's emotions. His epic poem is a shared cultural touchstone, story that reinforces their worldview, a world where even the mighty gods can be tricked, where courage is admirable but is no match for cunning, and where the forces of chaos are always waiting to challenge the order of the world. The formalities of the feast are now well and truly over. The great meal is being consumed, and the hall is alive with the power of a shared story. The skald's epic tale of Thor's journey reaches its conclusion. He sings of the giant king Loki, finally revealing the nature of his tricks. He explains how Thor, in his supposed failure, had in fact demonstrated a power so immense that it terrified the entire realm of the giants. He had wrestled with old age itself, almost moved the world's serpent, and drank a part of the ocean. The story ends not with a victory for Thor, but with a profound statement of his awesome, world-altering might. As the final, resonant chord from the lyre fades into the smoky air, the hall, which had been listening with rapt attention, erupts in a great roaring cheer. Men hammer their drinking horns on the tables and stamp their feet on the earthen floor. A thunderous applause for the skald's skill and for the glory of their favorite god. The skald, his duty done, gives a dignified nod and takes a long, well-deserved drink from his own horn. The main course of roasted ox is now little more than a pile of bones on the great carving table, but the feast is not yet over. The servants clear away the greasy platters and bring out the final course, a testament to the Jarl's desire to display every facet of his wealth and the bounty of his lands. There are no sweet-baked pastries in the modern sense. The sweetness of the Viking world is a more natural, earthy kind. Large wooden bowls are passed down the tables, filled with things to be eaten with the hands. There are roasted hazelnuts, their shells cracked, their meat rich and oily. There are dried apples, sliced and dehydrated during the autumn, their texture leathery and their flavor a concentrated, chewy sweetness. The greatest luxury is a large earthenware bowl containing a huge chunk of honeycomb, swimming in a pool of dark, golden honey. You use your knife to cut a piece of the waxy comb, chewing it to release the intensely sweet floral flavor of the honey within. It is a perfect accompaniment to the sharp, tangy cheese that is also being passed around. The combination of rich fat and pure sweetness, a delight on the tongue. As this final course is being enjoyed, Jarl Olaf makes another gesture of his immense status. He gives a quiet command to a servant, who disappears for a moment into the Jarl's private quarters. The servant returns, not with a bucket of ale or mead, but with several large earthenware pitchers, sealed with wax. These contain wine, a drink of almost mythical rarity and expense, imported at great cost from the vineyards of Francia. This is not for everyone. The wine is poured only for those seated at the high table, the Jarl, his family, and his most honored guests. It is a clear and powerful symbol of the inner circle of power. You watch as it is poured into fine glass cups, another imported luxury. Their delicate forms a stark contrast to the rough, hearty drinking horns used by everyone else. The act is not lost on anyone in the hall. It is a quiet, effective reminder of the rewards that come with being in the Jarl's favor. With the meal now concluded, the formal structure of the evening begins to dissolve. The skald's great performance is over, though he continues to pluck a soft, meandering melody from his lyre, a pleasant, unobtrusive sound that weaves its way through the growing noise of the hall. The focus of the room is no longer on a single performer. It is broken up into dozens of smaller, louder, and more intimate conversations. The great drinking horns are now passed with increasing frequency. The etiquette of the sumbul requires that a horn, when passed to you, must be at least partially drunk from before being passed on. It is a ritual designed to ensure that the entire hall grows drunk together, a shared journey into merriment and loosened tongues. The talk turns more personal, more boastful. Inspired by the tales of Thor and the great heroes of the past, the warriors begin to loudly recount their own deeds. A man down the bench from you stands in, holding his horn aloft, tells a story of his part in a raid on a monastery in Ireland, describing in vivid detail the weight of the silver chalices he carried back to the ship. Others, not to be outdone, tell their own tales of battles won, of monsters slain, and of shrewd bargains made in the trading posts of the East. The hall is now a roaring sea of sound, a place of immense, chaotic, and joyful energy. The formalities are over, the bellies are full, and the ale has worked its magic. The careful, ordered atmosphere of the arrival has given way to the true, unrestrained heart of the feast. This is no longer just a meal. It is a celebration of life, of strength, and of the bonds of loyalty that hold this dangerous and uncertain world together. The long night of entertainment, of games, of oaths, and of gift-giving is just beginning. As the last of the food is cleared away, the great hall enters the roaring heart of the evening. The physical hunger has been sated, but a different kind of appetite now takes center stage. The hunger for reputation, for glory, and for the deep, binding camaraderie of shared purpose. The air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the sweet, heavy scent of mead and ale. The initial respectful quiet has been completely burned away by the drink and the storytelling, replaced by a loud, boisterous, and joyful chaos. This is the phase of the feast where the future is forged. The third and final round of the sumble, the formal toasting ritual, now begins. A servant brings forth a special, ornate drinking horn, larger and more ancient-looking than the others. This is the braugerful, the cup of vows, and it is upon this vessel that the most solemn and binding oaths are to be sworn. Jarl Olaf is the first to stand, taking the great horn in his hands. He allows a moment of silence to fall, his presence alone enough to command the attention of the rowdiest warriors. He is no longer just a generous host. He is a war leader, a chieftain, looking ahead to the next season. The gods have blessed us, and my grandfather's spirit has watched over us, he begins, his voice a low rumble. But a man's luck is a thing he must make for himself. The silver in the chests will not replenish on its own, and a warrior's name is not earned by staying at home. A roar of approval goes up from the benches. He raises the horn high. I swear now, upon this horn, and before the gods and all of you, my kinsmen, that when the spring ice breaks, I will lead my ships west to the land of the Angles. I will not return until the hold of my ship is heavy with the silver from the church at Lindisfarne, or until the ravens feast upon my corpse on a foreign shore. The oath hangs in the air for a moment. A bold and dangerous declaration. He is staking his reputation and his very life on a specific, ambitious goal. Then the hall erupts in a thunderous cheer. This is the leadership they crave, the ambition that brings them all wealth and glory. He drinks deeply from the horn, sealing his vow. The braugerful is then passed to the warrior of highest rank beside him. The ritual now requires others to add their own strength to the Jarl's ambition. The warrior, a scarred and fearsome man named Gunnar, stands and takes the horn. And I swear, he shouts, that my shield will be beside yours, Jarl Olaf, and that my axe will be the first to break the door of that English church. He drinks, and the hall cheers again. One by one, the horn is passed among the most important warriors. Each man who takes it must either swear his own great oath or make a boast of a great deed he has already accomplished. A young, ambitious warrior swears to be the first man over the wall of an enemy fortress. An older man boasts of a duel he won years ago, recounting in vivid detail the final killing blow. These are not idle boasts. An oath sworn at the sumble is a sacred public contract. To fail in such a vow, or to be found to have lied in a boast, would bring a shame so profound that a man might prefer death. This ritual is the glue of the war band, a public weaving together of individual ambition and communal purpose. After the solemnity and high drama of the oath swearing, the mood of the hall shifts once more, becoming less formal, more playful, though no less competitive. The time for epic poetry is over, and the time for a battle of wits begins. The skald Bjorn, his face flushed with mead, raises a hand for quiet. "I have a question for this great hall," he says, a sly smile on his face. "I am a house without a door. I am a ship without a crew. Swallow the ships that ride me, though I have no throat or mouth. What am I? It is a riddle. A highly respected form of entertainment." A brief, puzzled silence falls over the benches as the warriors, their minds clouded by drink, grapple with the metaphorical language. Men shout out answers. "A whirlpool," cries one. "A great wave," shouts another. The skald shakes his head, a twinkle in his eye. Finally, a young man near the back, known for his cleverness, stands up. "It is the sea," he declares. A collective groan of appreciation and frustration goes through the hall. The skald nods in approval. Riddles are more than just a game. They are a test of cleverness, of the ability to see the world in a poetic and metaphorical way, a skill highly prized in this oral culture. More riddles are posed by the skald and by others, each one a small, intellectual contest set amidst the boisterous drinking. Between the riddles, other, less formal entertainments emerge. A man who has traveled to Miklagard, Constantinople, sings a strange, haunting song he learned there, his voice rough but heartfelt. Another, a nimble young man, performs a series of acrobatic flips and tumbles in the small, clear space before the high seat, earning a cheer and a piece of silver from the Jarl's purse. The music from the skald's lyre is now faster, more rhythmic, a driving beat that encourages the men to clap and stamp their feet. The roaring heart of the feast is now in full swing, a loud, chaotic, and joyful celebration of community, ambition, and the simple, profound pleasure of being alive, well fed, and safe in the warmth of the great hall. As the riddles and songs continue, the great hall breaks down into smaller pockets of activity, the entertainment becoming more varied and personal. In a quieter corner near the high seat, a more focused and intense drama is unfolding. A game of Hinnafoth, or King's Table, is underway. The game is played on a large checkered wooden board, its surface worn smooth with use. It is a game of pure strategy, not of luck. In the center of the board sits a single large kingly piece surrounded by his 12 loyal defenders. On the four edges of the board, a force of 24 attackers is arrayed, their goal to surround and capture the king. The king's goal is simply to escape to one of the four corner squares of the board. Tonight, the players are Jarl Olaf himself and an old respected chieftain from a neighboring fjord. The rest of the hall may be a sea of boisterous noise, but around this small, checkered battlefield, there is a bubble of intense, respectful silence. Other warriors gather around to watch, their faces serious, their eyes following every move. They are not just watching a game. They are watching a reflection of their own world, a constant struggle of strategy, of ambush, and of desperate defense against overwhelming odds. The Jarl, playing as the king, is in a precarious position. His defenders are scattered, and the chieftain's attackers are closing in, forming a trap. The Jarl leans forward, his great brow furrowed in concentration, stroking his beard as he contemplates his next move. The firelight flickers on the polished surfaces of the game pieces, carved from walrus ivory. The only sound is the soft click of a piece being moved to a new square. It is a quiet, intellectual battle, a reminder that the Viking mind valued cunning and strategy just as much as brute force. In another part of the hall, a different kind of contest is taking place. Space has been cleared on the earthen floor, and two massive, bare-chested young warriors are locked in a wrestling match, a form of grappling known as glima. There are no weapons, only strength, skill, and leverage. They circle each other, their feet stamping on the rush-covered ground, their bodies slick with sweat in the intense heat of the hall. The crowd around them is a roaring, shouting mass, placing bets, screaming advice, and cheering on their favorite. The match is a whirlwind of powerful, twisting movements, each man trying to throw the other off balance. Finally, with a great heave, one of the wrestlers lifts his opponent off his feet and brings him crashing down onto the floor. The victor stands over his defeated rival, his chest heaving, and lets out a great triumphant roar, which is answered by the cheers of those who bet on him. It is a raw, explosive display of the physical power that underpins this entire society. But as the night wears on, and the drinking horns are emptied and refilled time and time again, the good-natured competition can begin to take on a sharper, more dangerous edge. The boasts, which were once met with cheers, can be met with challenges. The jokes can land with the sting of an insult. You witness such a moment unfold down the bench from you. A warrior, his tongue loosened by ale, is loudly recounting a story from a past raid. Another man, from a different family, scoffs loudly. "I was on that raid," he slurs, his voice full of contempt. "And I remember you hiding behind the shield wall while the real fighting was done." The air in that section of the hall instantly grows cold and heavy. The first warrior slowly turns, his face a mask of fury. To have one's courage questioned in a hall full of your peers is the gravest of insults. "You call me a coward?" he snarls, his hand instinctively dropping to the hilt of the eating knife at his belt. The men around them fall silent, their own conversations forgotten. They watch, their eyes glinting in the firelight. A feast is a time of peace, but it is also a gathering of proud, violent men, and a single spark of insult can easily ignite a blaze of bloodshed. But before the conflict can erupt, two of the Jarl's personal warriors, his huskarls, who have been standing quietly against the wall, suddenly step forward. They are huge, grim-faced men, their loyalty to the Jarl absolute. They do not draw their own weapons. They simply place themselves between the two angry warriors, their sheer physical presence a powerful deterrent. One of the huskarls puts a heavy hand on the shoulder of the man who made the insult. "The Jarl's peace is not to be broken," he says, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You have drunk too much. Settle this in the training yard tomorrow if you must, but not in this hall." The two warriors, their drunken rage cooled by the sudden, sobering intervention, allow themselves to be separated. The moment of tension passes. The incident is a stark reminder that the joy and chaos of the feast are carefully contained. The Jarl's hall is a sanctuary, but it is his power and the ever-present threat of his enforcers that keeps the peace. The roaring heart of the feast has a dangerous rhythm. It is the Jarl's hand that must keep the beat from descending into violence. The tense moment passes. The two would-be combatants having been led away to cool their heads in the night air. The incident, though brief, serves its purpose. It reminds everyone in the hall of the violent passions that lie just beneath the surface, and of the Jarl's absolute authority in containing them. The boisterous, chaotic energy of the mid-feast has reached its natural limit. And now Jarl Olaf moves to channel that energy, to re-establish order and transform the rowdy celebration into a solemn affirmation of loyalty. He rises from his high seat. He does not need to shout. His movement alone is enough to command the attention of the hall. The skald's music softens to a low, respectful hum. The loud conversations die down once more. Jarl Olaf gives a sharp, single nod to one of his trusted huskarls, standing guard by the door to his private quarters. The huskarl disappears for a moment and returns, accompanied by two strong servants. Between them, they carry a large, heavy wooden chest. It is made of dark oak, bound with thick bands of iron, and secured with a great, complex lock. It is old, it's wood-scarred, and worn from 100 journeys. This is the Jarl's treasure chest, the physical heart of the clan's wealth. The accumulated plunder of years of successful raiding and trading. The chest is placed on the floor before the high seat, and with a large iron key, the Jarl himself unlocks it. He lifts the heavy lid, and even from your seat on the bench, you can see the dull, rich gleam of silver and gold within, glinting in the firelight. A collective, appreciative sigh goes through the hall. This is what the oaths, the risks, and the long months at sea are all for. You have all served me well, Jarl, Olaf says, his voice once again carrying to every corner of the hall. You have sworn oaths for the year to come. Now, you will receive your share of the luck the gods gave us this past season. A Jarl is only as strong as the warriors who stand with him, and a good warrior should not go unrewarded. He reaches into the chest and pulls out a magnificent arm ring. It is a heavy, twisted band of solid silver, thick as a man's thumb. He calls the first name Gunnar, son of Rolf. The scarred warrior who had first pledged his axe to the Jarls caused strides forward. He walks to the high seat and kneels on one knee before his lord, a gesture of profound respect. Jarl Olaf takes the silver ring and slides it onto Gunnar's powerful forearm. It is a perfect fit. For your courage at the battle on the Irish coast, the Jarl says, his voice loud enough for all to hear, and for your loyalty in the years to come. Gunnar rises, raises his newly adorned arm for all to see, and gives a short, heartfelt oath. My axe and my life are yours, Jarl. Olaf, he says, his voice thick with emotion. He then returns to his seat, his status and wealth visibly and publicly enhanced. One by one, the Jarl calls his warriors forward. The ceremony is long, and every man in the hall watches with intense focus. This is a public accounting, a precise and visible ranking of each man's worth in the Jarl's eyes. The gifts are varied. For most, it is an arm ring of silver, their size and weight varying according to the man's deeds and status. The Jarl is known as a breaker of rings, not just for his generosity, but because he will literally take a large ring and break off a piece, its weight carefully judged, as a payment or a lesser gift. For his most elite huskarls, the gifts are even greater. One man receives a new sword, its hilt inlaid with silver wire, its pattern-welded blade a marvel of the blacksmith's art. Another is given a fine chainmail shirt, its thousands of interlocking iron rings, a priceless piece of defensive armor that can mean the difference between life and death in battle. You are called forward. Your own heart beats faster as you walk the length of the hall and kneel before your Jarl. he clasps you on the shoulder and speaks of a skirmish in which you fought well. He then gives you your reward, a new cloak made of fine, deep red wool from Francia and fastened with a beautiful circular silver brooch. You thank him, swear your own oath of loyalty, and return to your seat, the soft, rich fabric of the cloak a warm and heavy weight on your shoulders, a public symbol of your lord's favor. The gift-giving ceremony is the political masterstroke that concludes the heart of the feast. It takes the chaotic, individualistic energy of the warriors and reforges it into a structured hierarchy of loyalty. The plunder, which was won by the collective, is now redistributed by the Jarl, reinforcing the fact that all wealth and status flows from him. The oaths of the Sumbul were promises for the future, gifts or rewards for the past. Together, they create a powerful, binding contract between the leader and his men. When the last gift has been given, and the heavy lid of the treasure chest is closed and locked, the formal part of the evening is well and truly over. The roaring heart of the feast has served its purpose. It has fed the body, stirred the spirit with tales of heroes, and bound the war band together with a web of sacred oaths and material rewards. Now, all that is left is for the long, celebratory night to slowly wind down, for the great fire to burn low, and for the embers of the evening to finally fade into slumber. The last gift has been given, and the great treasure chest has been closed and carried away. The ceremony, with its solemn oaths and public declarations of loyalty, is over. A profound and satisfying calm settles over the great hall. The wild, chaotic energy of the mid-feast has been channeled, spent, and finally transformed into a deep, contented sense of communal solidarity. The roaring heart of the feast has softened to a warm, steady glow. The men, their arms now heavy with the Jarl's silver, are filled with a quiet pride. They admire their new treasures, running their thumbs over the cool, twisted metal of their arm rings, testing the weight and balance of a new axe.
Oh, yes.
The gifts are more than just wealth. They are a physical manifestation of their worth, a tangible symbol of their place within the clan. The air is thick with a renewed sense of loyalty, a shared feeling of belonging to a strong and generous leader. The night is now very old. The moon is high in the sky, and the fire in the central pit, which has been a roaring inferno for hours, is now being allowed to slowly die down. Many of the guests, particularly the farmers and landowners who have a long ride ahead of them in the morning, begin to take their leave. They approach the high seat one by one, offering their thanks to the Jarl and his wife, their voices full of a deep, genuine respect. The Jarl nods to each of them, his duty as a host now winding down. As the hall slowly begins to empty, the atmosphere becomes more intimate. The great public celebration has transformed into a smaller, more personal gathering of the Jarl's core followers, his most trusted warriors and housecarls. The boasting and challenges are over. The conversations are now quieter, more reflective. Men gather in small groups, their voices low, speaking of the season past, of friends lost in battle, of their hopes for their children and their farms. The skald, his duty of formal recitation complete, now sits among a group of older warriors, his lyre resting beside him. He is no longer a performer, but a respected elder, sharing a quiet story, his voice a low, gravelly murmur. The lyre is picked up by a younger man, who plays a soft, simple, and somewhat melancholy tune. a quiet soundtrack for the waning hours of the night. A final round of drink is served, but it is different from the boisterous rounds of ale from earlier in the evening. The serving girls now carry pitchers of a strong, sweet mead, a more precious and potent brew saved for the end of the night. It is served in smaller horns, and it is meant for sipping a final warming toast to the bonds of friendship. Soon, the unmistakable signs of a long night's end begin to appear. Men yawn, stretching their weary limbs. Some lean back against the wooden walls, their eyes closing, their heads lolling to one side. A Viking feast of this magnitude is an endurance event. And after a full day of travel and a long night of eating, drinking, and celebrating, exhaustion has finally claimed its due. It is a fundamental rule of Viking hospitality that a guest who has been drinking in your hall should not be sent out into the cold and the dark. The Jarl's Hall is a sanctuary, and that sanctuary includes the right to a safe place to sleep. The preparations for slumber begin. Servants move through the hall, their movements now slow and quiet. The long trestle tables, their surfaces still sticky with honey and ale, are dismantled and stacked against the walls, clearing the great earthen floor. Other servants appear, their arms laden with huge, heavy piles of furs and woolen blankets. They carry the skins of bears, wolves, and reindeer, their thick pelts a promise of warmth against the cold that seeps up from the ground. There are no separate sleeping quarters for the guests. The great hall, which was the site of the feast, now transforms into a vast communal dormitory. The men will sleep where they celebrated. Most will simply find a space on the same long earthen benches where they sat for the meal, which are wide enough to serve as a sleeping platform. Others will lay their furs down on the rush-covered floor, seeking a spot closer to the dying embers of the long fire for warmth. You find your own spot on the bench, the new fine woolen cloak the Jarl gave you serving as a magnificent blanket. You watch as the last of the waking guests settle down. The Jarl himself, his duty as host finally complete, stands, gives a final silent nod to the room, and disappears with his wife into their private, partitioned quarters at the end of the hall. The great hall is now almost silent. The roaring fire has burned down to a long, deep, and mesmerizing bed of glowing red and orange embers that casts a soft, warm light throughout the space. The only sounds are the gentle crackle of the dying coals, the low sigh of the wind in the smoke hole above, and the deep, rhythmic breathing and soft snores of the 50 or so warriors now asleep in the hall. The air is still thick with the smells of smoke, spilled ale, and roasting meat, a pleasant, lingering ghost of the great celebration. The feast is over, and a deep communal peace has settled over the Jarl's great, smoky, and now sleeping house. You drift in a state between waking and sleeping, a deep and heavy slumber brought on by food, drink, and profound exhaustion. The sleep you find in the great hall is not a silent, isolated affair. It is a shared communal rest, a continuation of the feast's spirit in a quieter form. The sounds of the night are a gentle, rhythmic backdrop. The great fire has died down to a long, glowing spine of embers that breathes a soft red light into the heart of the darkness. You can hear the steady, soft crackle of the glowing coals and the occasional sigh as a log settles. Outside, the autumn wind howls, a lonely, mournful sound that only serves to emphasize the warmth and security of the hall. Around you is the sound of sleeping warriors, the deep, rumbling snores of the man on the bench next to you, the soft rustle of a fur blanket as another man turns in his sleep, the occasional word muttered from a dream. The Jarl's hounds, who have eaten their fill of the scraps from the floor, are curled up near the fire, their tails thumping softly in their own dreams of the hunt. The hard bench beneath you is unforgiving, but the new woolen cloak the Jarl gave you is a cocoon of warmth. Its fine, rich fabric smells faintly of the dye used to color it and the wood smoke of the hall. You are aware of the cold drafts that snake their way up from the floor, a constant reminder of the winter night outside. But the collective warmth of so many bodies and the radiant heat from the embers keeps the worst of the chill at bay. Your dreams are a chaotic tapestry woven from the threads of the evening. You see the flashing eyes of the Skald as he tells his tales, the glint of new silver on your arm, and you can almost taste the sweet, potent flavor of the final horn of mead. The first hint of the new day is not a sight, but a subtle change in the quality of the darkness. A faint, pale, and impossibly cold gray light begins to filter down from the smoke hole in the roof, slowly illuminating the swirling motes of dust and smoke that hang in the still air. The hall in this early light is a strange and peaceful landscape of sleeping forms, mounds of fur and wool from which emerges the occasional braided beard or tangle of hair. The first people to stir are not the warriors, but the servants and thralls. They move with a practiced silence, their bare feet making almost no sound on the rush-strewn floor.
Nice.
Their first task is to tend to the fire. They gently, carefully place small, dry pieces of kindling onto the embers and blow on them with a soft, steady breath, coaxing the sleeping coals back to life. A small, clean flame flickers, grows, and soon a new fire is born, its warmth beginning to push back against the morning chill. Soon after, the warriors themselves begin to wake. It is not a sudden event, but a slow, reluctant stirring. Man groans, stretching his arms and legs, his joints cracking in protest. Another sits up slowly, his head in his hands, the price of a long night of ale and mead making itself known. One by one, the sleeping forms resolve back into men. They sit on the edges of the benches, their faces bleary, their movements slow and deliberate. The great hall in the morning light is a scene of glorious disarray. The floor is a mess, the once fresh rushes now a trampled mat, littered with gnawed bones, cracked nutshells, and the occasional overturned wooden cup. The air no longer smells of savory roasting meat, but of cold stale smoke, spilled ale, and the close human smell of 100 sleeping bodies. The men begin their morning rituals. They wrap their cloaks tightly around their shoulders and make their way to the great doors, pushing them open to be met with a blast of cold, clean morning air. They relieve themselves, wash their faces in a trough of icy water, and comb their tangled hair and beards with combs carved from bone or antler. There is a quiet, groggy camaraderie, a shared experience of surfacing from the depths of the celebration. The Jarl's duties as a host are not yet complete. Hospitality demands that no guest be sent on a long journey with an empty stomach. The servants who have been busy rekindling the fire now bring out a simple morning meal. This is not another feast. It is a practical, restorative offering. There are platters of the leftover ox meat, now cold and jellied, but still rich and sustaining. There are chunks of dark bread and the last of the sharp white cheese. A great steaming iron pot is hung over the fire, filled with a simple, hot broth or a thin oat porridge, a warm and welcome comfort against the morning chill. The drink is not strong ale, but a weak small beer, or fresh creamy milk from the Jarl's own cattle. You and the other warriors gather around the newly stoked fire, warming your hands, and eat the simple meal. The conversation is subdued, the booming boasts of the night before are replaced by quiet plans for the journey home. As the meal is finished, Jarl Olaf and his wife Sigrid emerge from their private quarters. They are dressed simply, and they walk among their guests, wishing them a safe journey and thanking them once more for their loyalty. It is a final personal gesture that solidifies the bonds forged during the feast. The great social event is now well and truly over. The time for celebration has ended, and the time for departure has begun. With your stomach full of warm broth and your mind clear from the cold morning air, you prepare to depart. You seek out the Jarl, who is standing near the great doors, bidding farewell to his guests. You thank him for his hospitality, a formal and necessary gesture of respect. He claps you firmly on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that is worth as much as the silver he gave out. "Go well," he says. "Be ready when the ice breaks." It is both a farewell and a command. You make your way to the entrance, where you retrieve your weapons. The familiar weight of your axe at your belt and your sword in its scabbard feels strange after a night without them. It is a reminder that you are leaving the protected peace of the Jarl's Hall and returning to the wilder, more dangerous world outside. You collect your horse from the stable boy and join the stream of other guests making their way from the steadying. The journey home is quiet and reflective. The boisterous, anticipatory mood of the previous day's travel has been replaced by a deep, weary sense of contentment. The sun is weak, but the air is cold and crisp, and the sound of your horse's hooves on the frozen track is a steady, rhythmic beat. As you ride, your mind replays the events of the long night. The feast was far more than just a great meal. It was the social engine of your world, a complex and vital ceremony that accomplished many things at once. You think of the food, the sheer, overwhelming abundance of it all. The memory of the rich, roasted ox and the endless horns of ale is a powerful one. A story of wealth and generosity that will be told and retold throughout the lean months of the coming winter. The feast was a statement, a declaration by the Jarl that his lands were prosperous and that he could provide for his people, even in the darkest time of the year. You think of the oaths sworn on the Braggerfell. Those were not drunken promises. They were sacred, binding vows, public contracts that have now set the course for the next year. You and every other warrior in that hall are now bound to the Jarl's ambition to sail west. The feast has focused the clan's energy, transforming 100 individual warriors into a single, cohesive warband with a shared and profitable purpose. You finger the silver brooch that holds your new cloak. The gift-giving was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. It was a transaction, a public exchange of treasure for loyalty. The silver you now possess is a tangible link to your Jarl, a constant reminder of your worth to him, and of your duty in return. The feast was a redistribution of the clan's wealth, ensuring that every man felt rewarded and personally invested in the success of the group. Most importantly, you think of the community. In a world of scattered farmsteads and long, isolating winters, the feast was a vital moment of connection. It was a chance to see old comrades, to share stories, to compete in games, and to be reminded that you are part of something larger and more powerful than yourself. You finally arrive back at your own homestead. It is a sturdy, well-built longhouse, but it is a fraction of the size of the Jarl's great hall. The contrast does not make you feel poor. It simply reinforces the natural order of things. You are greeted by your family, their faces lighting up with relief at your safe return. That evening, you sit by your own, much smaller, central fire. You share the last of the bread and cheese you brought back from the feast. You show your children the fine silver brooch, and you let them feel the rich, soft wool of your new cloak. And you tell them the story of the feast. You tell them of the great roasted ox. You tell them the skald's tale of Thor and the giants. And you tell them of the Jarl's oath to sail to England in the spring. The feast is over, but its influence endures. It has fed the body, yes, but it has also fed the spirit. It has reinforced the bonds of loyalty, set the course for the future, and affirmed your place in the world. As you sit in the quiet warmth of your own home, a deep sense of peace settles over you. The long festive day is truly over, and you are content. Our journey into the Viking Great Hall is now at an end. We have heard the skald's epic tales, felt the heat of the long fire, witnessed the solemn swearing of oaths on the drinking horn. It was a world where a man's worth was measured in his courage and his leader's generosity, where hospitality was a sacred duty, and where a single great feast could forge the bonds that would shape the destiny of a kingdom. That world of roaring fires, rich feasts, and chanted poetry has now faded away, leaving only the quiet of the present moment. The Vikings' long and festive day is over, and now, so is yours. There is nothing left to do but to rest, to let go of the day, and to drift into the deep and peaceful sleep that you deserve. Sleep well.